Welcome to the Board of Education meeting. We have already met in executive session and we saluted the flag while we were there. So at this point, we're up to a roll call. Mr. McLaughlin.
Mr. Byrne.
Here.
Ms. Schaefer.
Here.
Mrs. Gray.
Here.
Mr. Salmon.
Here.
Mrs. White.
Here.
Mrs. Richmond.
Here.
Mrs. Korn.
Here.
Mrs. Wooldridge.
Here.
Mr. Markarian.
Here.
Mr. Syed.
Here.
Ms. Fox.
Here.
Mrs. McCune.
Here.
Madam President.
Thank you. We're up to the statement of public notice in your agenda. I'd just like to point it out to you, and you can read it at your leisure. There are two times during the meeting where there's public comment. The first is public comment on agenda items where you can comment or question about any of the items that are on the agenda or on the presentation that's given tonight. And then the second time is later in the meeting. There's public comment on non-agenda items where you can comment or ask questions about whatever you want to. Also want to point out that this meeting is being recorded. Thank you. Okay, we are already up to our student representative. It's the beginning of a new school year, so we have a new student representative, Jimmy Gao. Hi, Jimmy. Welcome.
Okay, so I guess it's a little intro of mine.
Sure.
All right, yeah. Hi, I'm Jimmy Gao. This is my fourth year serving on the student council here at Ridge. I was serving as the class president for the 9th, 10th, and 11th grades, and now I'm really glad that I got this opportunity to be the student body president for the entire high school as a whole. I really do think it's important that students get involved in everything they can, and so I'm really glad I'm able to be a liaison for like the Board of Ed. You know, there's only one of me up here and almost 2,000 kids at Ridge, and they have a lot of opinions and a lot of opinions that want to be shared. Some of them are informed, some of them are not, but nonetheless, I'm here to share them. It's a little intimidating to be up here, but I'm really hoping to work with you guys on everything that I can get involved with. You know, I really think that we're all working to the same goal of trying to make Ridge better on all of the high schools, or rather schools in our district better. And so if there's anything I can do to help, you know, serve you guys or serve the constituents at Ridge on my end, just please let me know. I'm really looking forward to working with you guys this year.
Thank you. I actually was just talking to several board members. So this last year, we've always met with the student government at Ridge, you know, with the Board of Education every year, but our advocacy committee went around and met with the student governments at all the schools last year, and it was great, and we loved hearing from all the kids. The elementary school kids had such good ideas and such good feedback. We were really impressed with them, the people that got to go on that. So we love talking to the students and hearing from the students, and we're glad that you could be here. So do you want to tell us, did the beginning of school go okay and everything?
Yeah, sure. I think it'd be a little more troubling if there was news to talk about,
Right.
since it's been only 3 days of school.
Yeah.
But everything's gone off to a smooth start as far as I know. And right now our student government's preparing for the typical, you know, fall season, homecoming, pep rally, you know, homecoming game, the football season, and everything we can do to make, you know, Ridge as spirited and as happy as can be heading into the beginning of the school year. So.
Great, thank you. This is going to be my first year in forever that I don't have a student at Ridge, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's really strange. I almost paid my PTO dues without thinking. But I'll be back next year. But I definitely will still be at some football games and some other events this year to see their friends that are still here. Does anyone else have any questions for Jimmy? Okay.
I just want to say welcome.
Okay.
Good to have you here.
Okay, great. We're going to go down now for the presentation, so the board's going to move down there. Yeah, I told them that in email, though.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I wanted to just briefly introduce our topic for this evening is on our tiered system of supports. So we actually have a team of folks that are here helping to present tonight on our agenda. I kind of noted the administrative team because we have a lot of contributors that helped us prepare this presentation for you. Our special services team is here. Jean O'Connell is here, Lisa Vitale is here, Stephanie Orr is here, Allison Reed is here, our our assistant superintendent for curriculum, Miss Fox is here. And also she brought with her a couple of department supervisors. Grant Comer, our math supervisor, is here, as well as David Hunter, our English supervisor. So I just wanted to thank everyone for coming out tonight in terms of our administrative team to help present this information to you, the public, and to the Board of Education. So without further ado, Ms. O'Connell is going to get us started. Thank you again for coming.
Good. Welcome back, everybody. It seems like just a few months ago we were here talking about unified and vocational skills. I think the summer went a little bit too fast. However, here we are. Tonight we're going to speak about something a little bit different. We're going to speak about special ed, because that's why I would be here. But we're going to take you back to the very beginning on how a child begins to struggle in school and then how a child eventually becomes classified. For those of you that been on the board for a few years, Lisa and I did, I think it was about 3-4 years ago, a presentation till board members were sick of seeing us, about a report that the New Jersey state came out with. And what they did is they did an evaluation on special education in the state of New Jersey. And they came out with a list of recommendations. And one of the highlights of these recommendations was really that special education and general education were two separate entities, and they shouldn't be. So either a child was in general education, and if it didn't work out, the child went right into special education. So we took a look at that ourselves to see if that was what was happening here. And we sort of found the same exact type of situation. So we looked at the report and we checked out some of the findings that they had. And one of the things the task force said that needs to be done is there needs to be more of an implementation as far as a tiered system of support. And there also needs to be more that's done at the INRS level. Now, this is something that the federal government has always said, but however, the state of New Jersey has not always followed through with that. So Lisa and I and Kristen and everyone else took it upon ourselves to get together and what can we do? Not so much not to, our main goal was not that we didn't want children to be classified. Of course, I want children to be classified. But however, we have struggling learners. And what are we doing for those struggling learners? Do they necessarily need special education? According to federal law, special education should be the very, very last place a child goes to. We should try every solitary strategy we can first, every type of intervention, and then if those children are still struggling, then we go in and we evaluate the students and we do classification. And then even at some point, students should always try to get back to gen ed because your ultimate goal is general education. It's not special education. So what we've done over the past few years is put those tiered systems of support in place. And I think the programs that we have begun to develop and change that mindset a little bit has come a little way. So we're each going to get up and talk a little bit about what's going on.
Okay, so whenever we've presented, we've always used a triangle. Triangles always get us in trouble, but we're hoping this triangle will not get us in trouble because it gets confusing. So what this triangle is how New Jersey views their tiered system of support. So that's why at the very bottom you'll see it says New Jersey Tiered System of Support. So just like Jean said, there's RTI models out there across the country. There are tiered systems across the country. New Jersey took about 2 years to find out how they wanted to run theirs in New Jersey and ultimately how they want us to run it. So what you'll see is there's 3 boxes on the outside. So the first one's going to be Tier 1. So when you think of Tier 1, you're going to think of it just like as if you were building a foundation or in the house or a basement. That Tier 1 has to be high-quality environments for learning, curriculum, and instruction. It is also general education. So when you see Tier 1, you're thinking that is what our core curriculum is, that's what our atlases, Rubicon, all of that is going on in that tier 1 for all students. When you move over to tier 2, what you're going to start to see, and this is important, it says tier 2 is tier 1 plus. So right off the bat, we're trying to take the same amount of time we have in a school day and add a plus to it. Okay? That plus is supplemental supports in those core areas, language arts, mathematics. At times it might be behavior, it also could be social skills. When we look at that, it's going to be in small groups, so it's a lower student-teacher ratio. It's also going to be targeted sustained interventions. So that means that the pacing is going to slow down. So if we know a child's having difficulty segmenting, we're going to spend more time targeting that in a sustained setting, more so than the gen ed. So the gen ed is moving on. We are supporting that tier 2 with a sustained intervention. The progress monitoring needs to be regular. So what that usually means, and it depends on what the skill is, the intervention, and also the child is a variable in itself. We monitor progress. We want to know, is this working? Is it not working? Why is it working? And why is it not working? We look for progress monitoring to be sometimes every 2 weeks. If it's a small isolated skill, that is something we can get and master quicker. If it's a skill that is, let's say, addition of a phoneme or deletion of a phoneme, that's going to probably be a 6-week span. Okay? Then what you'll see is it's provided to some students. So again, that tier 1 is gen ed. So this is going on for all students. Some students are getting this plus this. Then you go to tier 3. So tier 3, right off the bat, you're asking for tier 1, tier 2, plus tier 3. Still same amount of day and hours. In that, you're looking for more intensive, sustained, sometimes could be individualized academic and social as well as behavioral interventions. So when you look at that intensive, usually that intensive means that it's going to be a lower student-teacher ratio. So that might be a 1-to-2. When you look at, obviously, sustained, it's going to be hitting that target again and again. For some learners, a skill or a concept could be taught, let's say, in gen ed for 1 week. And they've done that and done it, and some of them get it. For some of the struggling learners or even special ed students, in order for that skill to move from your short-term memory to your long-term memory, because that's where it needs to be. So it's like riding a bike or driving yourself to work and you don't know how you got there, but it's fluid, and you're arrived. That takes more rehearsals, and that practice and those rehearsals take time. That's where that sustainability comes in, that you have to keep going. So you can't just stop and say, okay, I have 2 weeks to do this. You have 2 weeks to learn. You didn't get it. We're moving on. Yes, in gen ed, that may be what's happening, but then as the support systems come into place, those support systems are picking up that sustainability for that child. Otherwise, what starts to happen is gen ed is moving, child can't keep up, but we need them to keep moving in gen ed while we're going in and cleaning up any of those skill deficits. So it definitely is a balancing act. We'll see how much trouble that got in. So what New Jersey did is they looked at that tiered system of support, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, and then they did some more research. They went across the country and they looked at what other school districts and other states have in their support system. And they came up with these items, these essential components. They have to be part of it for it to be efficient, effective, valid, and reliable. So 1, definitely staff development, a universal screener, high-quality learning environment, curriculum, and instructional practice. Sometimes we forget that environment, and that's key. Database decision-making, collaborative problem-solving teams, and progress monitoring. Each of these headers, I'm going to have a slide coming up next that will go into more detail about that. If you look at the parentheses, what you're going to see is some of these items will go through 1, 2, and 3. Some of them are just for 2 and 3, or some of them are just for 1. Okay? So I started with staff development. We've been working with PLC grouping for about, I guess, 4 or 5 years. And one of the books that we were driven to read as a group to learn about PLCs had this statement in it, and it just kind of resonated with me. And the statement was that many people believe a teacher's profession is only being responsible for standing in front of a class and teaching. And that for us in our country, staff development does not count as time well spent for a teacher, that they're not in front of the class with the students teaching them, they're not doing their job. And it shows, and it went through for PLC, that a lot of the collaboration and the professional development that other countries do, it's what lends itself to them having higher expectations, scores, and accountability for student learning. So that's why it always ends up being last on most people's slides, so I moved it up to be first. Staff college. So what we did this year and in past years, we have to do 6-hour staff colleges. So after we're looking at any of these tier systems and anything that we have implemented, I'm doing at least 2 staff colleges. We're also doing a 15-hour class staff college. The 15-hour ones are for all new teachers. Stephanie and Allison are running that, and that's understanding about different learners, and not just, again, like modifications and accommodations, but also their kind of skill set, but also social and emotional pieces are in there too. We've done some intervention and referral team training, so a lot of times the teams meet in their own buildings. We brought them together last maybe February, and we had a speaker come in and speak to all the teams, K to 12, over at Liberty Corner Library, so that we can go through some of the bases that should be consistent throughout the district as we look at different tiers. We have 95% groups, so that is a group that is working with us primarily in the elementary. They're helping us look at some of the scores that we have of students as we assess them through screeners, and then they're providing on-site training, some coaching. They also help us work with some of the data analysis. Kindergarten, first grade, second grade teachers, those students don't take PARCC, so they're not as accustomed to looking at data, so when they first get it, they're very, very nervous, so we've been working with that group to help us. We also have done a lot of training on differentiated instruction. And when we talk about the instruction, it's not just the content, the process, and the product in Gen Ed, but it's also what it looks like as a teacher. So a lot of elementary buildings have guided reading, they have writer's workshop, and they have centers. So let's look at centers a little bit differently. If we have a student that is needing more rehearsals, that child maybe is going to that center 2 times for blending, as opposed to going to this center for a skill that they already have, or that it might not be where their lowest deficit is. Technology, we've been looking at different online programs that will allow us not only to track how the students are learning, but also it kind of gives the teacher an idea of within your classroom, these 3 students have the same error, you might want to work with them for 5 or 10 minutes. So it's not having the teacher do all that data analysis, but the computer doing that. Administration and data analysis. So administration of some of the assessments. An assessment is great, but it has to be administered with fidelity. There has to be consistency, especially with those, God bless you, with the universal screeners. Oops. So I took this slide from 95% group. I was able to get permission to do that, so I was allowed to. So when we look at Tier 1, one of the pieces that you saw that was in the essential components was a universal screener. So this was the easiest way, I think, to understand what it is. So the purpose is a universal screener. That means in kindergarten and first grade, we test every single kindergartner and first grade in all 4 elementary buildings 3 times a year. We do a fall, a winter, and a spring. During that time, they are getting an administration of what we would call DIBELS. So that stands for Dynamic Indicator of Basic Early Literacy Skills. That has been researched and tried and true to show what we're assessing on this assessment is the foundational skills that a child would need to be a proficient reader. It is at a kindergarten level, less than 3 minutes per child. At a first grade level, it's about 5 minutes, and to get the data, it's about $1 a child. And you can run zillions of reports to help us look at data and make decisions. So what happens is all the students, just like a funnel, are going in. Some of the students that are coming out are going to hit that below benchmark. The benchmarks change from the fall to the winter to the spring, because a child can be cleared benchmark in September, but we know what happens. It gets harder as the year goes, so they move their benchmark. So we're not losing any kids. So you might be green here and green here. Something got you caught up and now you're yellow or red. We want you to come and see us and figure out what's going on. So it doesn't just say in the September, you're good to go. It's 3 times a year for kindergarten and first graders. The students that are below benchmark, Dibbles tells us kind of like, you go to the doctor, something's going on. You know, you have a fever, I'm not really sure, let me now do a strep test. That strep test is going to be a diagnostic. So we know you have a fever because you came out of the funnel, for lack of a better term. Now we want to know what does that fever tell us? Maybe it's strep. We do the strep test, got it. We do the strep test, is it something else we have to look at? So in that diagnostic, we then bring those students back and we do another 5-minute test. And this 5-minute test is more aligned with what we found out that they may not have been proficient in from Dibbles. So for example, Dibbles usually has 4 subtests. If a child is proficient in the first 2, we're not going to go back and test them when we go to the diagnostic. That's a waste of their time and ours. We're going to look at those 2 lowest levels that they weren't proficient in and get some more info about what is going on here and how can we help the kid. When we talk about that, if you're in IRNS meeting or elementary, you're going to see that it says phonological awareness. We call it PASI because everything in special ed is just an acronym, or looks like an RTI too, acronym. Phonics screener is a PSI. So we talked about high quality learning environment, curriculum, and instruction now. All of this falls under tier 1, 2, and 3. However, how it's played out is very different. So the first thing I want you guys to look at is the groupings for instructional environment. Then we're going to talk a little bit about National Reading Panel, and it's a clearinghouse called What Works in terms of phonological awareness and phonics, and then some of the actual instruction and a gradual release of responsibility. So the first one is going to be a grouping. So when you look at this is a normal grouping that you're going to see in most of our elementary buildings. You're going to see writer's workshop, you're going to see desk in the center. Over here on the left might be a small instructional support table. Kidney table is what we call them. Everybody wants one in gen ed in elementary. Then we have a teacher over here, and then in the middle are the others, maybe let's say 15 students doing something independently in first grade or kindergarten, doing something independently. So what we have to look at, that's a tier 1 gen ed classroom. That doesn't always suffice enough for some students that need tier 2 or tier 3. This is what we have in kindergarten and first grade for tier 2 and tier 3. So this is something called walk to intervention, or we call it WIN. And it's grouping across the whole entire grade level. So if you look here, you're going to see that this grade 1 group has 80 students, and during this half an hour, there are 7 staff members available. So what we've done is we've used Dibbles data, and if the students needed that diagnostic, like the strep throat test, and figured out exactly what they needed. It doesn't matter who their gen ed teacher is. We then group them across a grade level. So we flood the grade with all the staff that we have for that half an hour, and then we break the students up by lowest skill deficit. So for 30 minutes, 4 times a week, those children are working with peers, no more than usually 5 students, on a specific skill that we have identified based upon data that they need assistance in. When you look at the image, you're going to see, Here, you're going to have 20 students and 28 students. This green benchmark, these are the kids that went through the funnel and they were at benchmark at this time. Some of them might not be in benchmark in winter, but right now in fall, they're at benchmark. This side of the screen and the students have a higher student-teacher ratio because they're not struggling. They are pretty much on grade level doing what they need to be doing. As we move from here to here, you're going to see in a first grade classroom, phonological awareness in letters, phonological awareness in letters. Here's two sets of classes, or two separate groups, both with 5 students, lower student-teacher ratio. Those students need that intensive and sustained instruction. That's where that small group is. This is still not special ed. I love this slide, personally, sorry. So when we talk about curriculum, because remember we need high quality curriculum, so that's evidence-based, it comes from the clearinghouse of what works, and the National Reading Panel in 2000, not all research is created equal. So what they did for the National Reading Panel is they got together with a group of people from Teachers College Columbia in New York City, and they did a review of all different reading research in phonics, phonemic awareness, also fluency, comprehension, vocabulary. And they looked at what does research show works for students that are needing to learn these skills. And it wasn't just what works for special ed students or gen ed students, what works for these kids to learn how to read. So part of what they looked at was phonological awareness. So when you look at phonological awareness, this picture is a continuum, and you'll see at the very top it says tier 1, 2, and 3. This is something that all students need to be able to do to read. It's a foundational skill. It's all done auditory phonological awareness. Why I put it up there is that for the trajectory of kindergarten, you're going to start at skill 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and by the time this hits, they're moving on to first grade. That would be tier 1. Where tier 2 or tier 3 come in is that the gen ed teacher in a classroom, this might be around March-ish, is working on this. There are some students that still have not been able to segment or blend nonsense words or blending of non-compound words. So their tier 2 and 3 instruction, if you go back to that other slide, would be an additional 30 minutes from their win time working on this. It's not at the cost of this. So gen ed is going on. This is tier 1 working on this skill. Tier 2 and 3 are working on some of these deficit skills that if we do not clean up here, we will pay for down the line in here. And the students are not going to be successful. It is a continuum and it's a hierarchy. So it goes from syllables to onset and rhyme to phonemes. Then the next one, what you'll see, again, this is tier 1, 2, and 3. When we look at students in the terms of phonics in grade 1, 2, and 3, grade 1 are the red kind of boxes, 2 green, 3 is blue. Same concept here. So when we look at first graders, it's a little gray up here, but this is going to be first grade, second, third. Does this mean that every second grader has to have every single one and meet this box before they move on? No, it doesn't. But what it does mean is we have some markers of what a first grader should do. And if they're not doing, let's say, are able to produce or read blends and digraphs, and it's April, we need to get in there and look at that a little closer. And that's what that universal screener and diagnostic does. When we look at the difference specifically between tier 2 and tier 3, these are the highlights. There's more, but these are the main things. It's definitely a small group. You saw that on the circle. Green on this side had 20, 25, 5 and 5. You have to scaffold the child. So one of the biggest pieces that came out of the National Reading Panel was explicit and direct instruction. It used to be called skill and drill. That's when it was done the whole entire day to people like me when I was learning how to read in the green and purple modern curriculum phonics book. When we talk about direct, structured lessons. We're talking about a mini lesson for maybe 5 to 10 minutes to really show that child how she or he needs to approach this task. Then the gradual release of responsibility is, I did it as a teacher, I showed you. Now we're going to do it together. Now off you go. For a lot of our children in Tier 2 and 3, they need a little bit more of that I do, meaning the teacher does, before they're ready to do the whole group class, or the we do, or the you do. And that's where you see that sustainment or increase or decrease, increase of frequency and duration. Also, you always look at the lowest target skill deficit. So when you think about those continuums, if we're asking somebody that to do skill 5 and we know they're still in skill 3, is that really fair? No, that's our job to figure out how do we scaffold and get them there. The lower student-teacher ratio and the grouping being the same identified intervention group allows for more corrective feedback. I know in math, because I always talk about reading, but if you can, with math, find that error as soon as possible with that child and correct it then, it reduces the chance of them reinforcing that error over and over and over again. And that's why those lower student-teacher ratio groups allow you to be able to do that. It gives that child the corrective feedback as well as the positive reinforcement. It's instructor-driven, and we're allowed to vary the paces. There's extra learning time outside of the core. This slide kind of puts it a little bit together for you guys. It's using data to inform instruction. So what we're looking at is that red would be the screener or the dibbles. That's the funnel slide. The intervention would be the whole class with the instructional support teacher and the gen ed teacher. Then we'd also look at further intervention of the students with that WIN group. And then we come back and we do another assessment and we progress monitor, because we want to know if what we're doing here is making a difference. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It might mean that we have to back up, or it may mean they made some progress, but we might need to see them, let's say, instead of maybe 4 times for a half an hour, we might want to kind of squeeze in another 10 or 15 minutes 2 times a week to get those rehearsals and that time doing the skill. And then the intervention, we look at an increase or a decrease, but this slide, again, is all based upon data. It's what the child does. Progress monitoring. So here the progress monitoring is really where we're looking to see, is that rate of progress sufficient? Is there a response? And what is it? Do we keep doing more? Do we keep doing less? Do we move forward? We've seen some students get intervention, and after that, let's say 6 weeks, by week 3, they're out of that intervention group. It depends on the student. That's why we have to progress monitor, because if that child got that skill in 3 weeks, just because we said it's a 6-week time until they're tested, I'm not keeping them there in 6 weeks. I'm going to move you on to the next one. You proved yourself. For Tier 2 and Tier 3, the problem-solving teams that we have currently are intervention and referral services. So that is at each of the elementary buildings, as well as the middle school and high school. Stephanie Orr covers the 6 to 8, the 9 to 12 with the building administrators, depending on what grade level they are. I cover the K to 5 with the building administrator. It's usually the assistant principal at the elementary, the guidance counselor, and myself. And during that time, that's where teachers and sometimes parents can come in and say, I have a concern about this. I'm not sure if my son or daughter might need additional help. I would like to see them have more gains in reading. And we talk about what the data is, and then we determine some interventions based upon that data. So, we do have a saying that without data, it's an opinion. I need to see the data. You're not going to go to the hospital and have them do a surgery without some data or some blood work or anything. So we want that data there. I am done.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome. Ms. Fox.
So now that Lisa gave you all the pedagogy you need about our intervention and the instruction that we use in intervention, I was just going to talk specifically about some of the Tier 2 supports we do provide throughout the district, really from K to 12 and for some different populations. There's actually a lot of programs that we do. I'm going to talk about one of them, but the first one listed is the Viking Academy, you may be familiar with, and/or MAP at the high school. The Viking Academy is at William Annan, and MAP is at the high school. So this is a program for students that might need some additional motivation, and they spend some time in the classroom setting in those two buildings, trying to motivate them towards increased academic performance. So that is an intervention, but it is not targeting instruction in the way Lisa was describing. It is more around their approach to being a student, and developing strategies to motivate them towards improving performance. English as a second language is another program for a very targeted population. For students with limited English proficiency, we do offer English as a second language as well as academic support programs for students who need some extra support. So that's just another Tier 2 type of support. These students are also getting all of the Tier 1 programming that Lisa also talked about. Instructional support is the one that I'm going to speak about in more depth. This program spans really K-12, so I wanted to just give you a little bit of an overview of what it looks like in the district. It is going to be, in addition to Tier 1, it is a Tier 2 support, but this is the philosophy of the program, the mission of the program. It's a general education intervention program that is grounded in our curriculum, but it's driven by student needs. So the purpose of the program is really to identify students who are struggling in particular targeted areas and give them some specific targeted instruction, but within the classroom setting most of the time, especially at the K-5 level. The way they are identified is with the measures you see on the screen, data-driven students who are showing a skill deficit in one or more areas. So at the K-5 level, like I said, this occurs within the classroom, mostly a push-in model, where the students receive classroom instruction as part of or separate from the regular classroom setting. Lisa showed you a diagram of the classroom, and that instructional support group will often meet at that kidney-shaped table in the back of the room. There are, in each building, 3 to 4 instructional staff members. At least 2 of them must be reading specialists or have the reading specialist certification. And in the mathematics, we also have support. They are elementary certified, and they provide mathematics support for students who are demonstrating a need for targeted instruction. You also see the number of students receiving instructional support in each building in last school year, 18-19, in both reading, in ELA, reading and writing, and mathematics. So you notice that there are more students receiving reading and writing instructional support than in mathematics. That tends to be the case where I think, as Lisa was focusing on, struggling readers is more pronounced in the elementary schools, and then I think we see more students receiving math instruction, or those numbers increase slightly as the students get a little bit older and mathematics gets more complex. At 6-8, this is not a push-in model anymore. It is a class that the students are identified to participate in, recommended by the administration, by the teachers, based on scores and just their performance in class. And the students would be taking this support class in place of one of their cycle electives in William Annan. Usually identified by how they are performing on the state mandated test, but supported by local assessments and other measures that we employ. So at William Annan, we have 4 ELA certified teachers and 1 reading specialist providing the support, and 3 certified math teachers providing the support. And you see the numbers look smaller, but remember in the elementary school, that's 6 grades in 4 buildings, and now we've got 3 grades when they've all come together. And then when we get to high school, you notice that the numbers go down, right? The students are receiving less support in this way, but that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to move them more into the general education. But we do have some students receiving support, again, identified through test scores, multiple measures recommended by teachers, and generally targeted to help students become proficient on state testing, but recommended that they take these classes. And so you see we had 2 students this year receiving ELA instruction at the high school, grades 9 and 10, and we have a few more receiving math. instruction in those grade levels. As I said, it increases in math typically and decreases in reading instruction. Now I'm finished. Okay, so now we're back to special education again. So after students have received all of those interventions and the interventions are not working, then a child definitely needs to be evaluated by the child study team. There are also students that have designated disabilities, such as a student with autism that we know needs different services, and those students do not go through this entire referral system. So Burnett Township has a continuum of services. We have to have a program in place once a child turns age 3 till age 21. So it's a long period of time. We can't give a child a program from 3 until, say, 7 and all of a sudden drop the program off. But we take a lot of our children from age 3 all the way up to age 21 to meet those very specific needs that those students have. Each one of our students has a case manager that's assigned to them. Once the child has been classified, there's a case manager that's assigned and that oversees the programming of those students. The members of the child study team are extremely important because they're sort of the liaison that goes between the home and the school. They're the ones that get the information that's collected at each of our annual reviews, and they're the people that really change. I call them the gatekeepers of an IEP. If there's something written into the IEP, they better know about it, and they better know why it's been written inside of there. If they're going to question it, they need to speak to teachers, they need to speak to parents, they need to understand. But they're the ones that are in charge of what goes into the IEP. Of course, everything we do in special education is run by law. It's all done by federal law, and then after the federal law, it goes down to the state of New Jersey. State of New Jersey has to implement everything that the federal government says, but the state of New Jersey can add on a few more requirements for all of us. The thing about law is you think it's black and white, but it's not, and that I've learned the hard way. It is very, very gray. So that's sometimes, those are the things that sort of can get us into a little bit of trouble. But one of the major considerations that we consider whenever we're doing an IEP is that parents are a major part of the IEP team. A teacher cannot, or a child study team member cannot go into a meeting with a finalized IEP and just hand it over to a parent and say, this is it, we've all decided what it is you're going to do. We encourage all of our child study team members to go in with a draft to be able to discuss what's in that draft. And the input in that draft comes from the teachers or the therapist, both special ed and general ed teachers. And then we come to the table and we discuss with the parents what's going on. Child has to be used to be able to have to be tested every 3 years to qualify for special education. That's no longer the case. We have some students that have pretty significant disabilities, and there's no sense to do what we would call a reevaluation on those students, have them go through the psychological test, have them go through an educational, just to say that they still qualify. So we no longer have to do that piece. Now also, and this has been a few years in the making, a general education teacher has to be present. Because, as I'm going to explain to you, our ultimate goal is always the least restrictive environment, and the least restrictive environment is general education. So back in the day, when I was a special ed teacher, it was just special ed people at the table, and we would talk about what was going on in special ed, but we didn't have the input of a general education teacher. Why can't this child be in a general education class? What is it that the child is lacking in that general education class? So every meeting that we have has our special education teacher, but must always have a general education teacher present. We also do transition services at age 14 in the state of New Jersey. The federal government requires that we begin it at age 16, but in New Jersey it starts at 14. The rationale for that is, where are students going? It's too late when a child is, say, 16, 17 years of age to make some of these decisions. For some of our students, we have to start making these plans at age 14, depending on the level of disability that the child has. So we begin to take a look at where the child is now, where the child plans to be at age 21 when they leave us, and our ultimate goal is to fill in those gaps in between if we possibly can. So what is the IEP? The IEP is every child that is classified must have an IEP. An IEP is reviewed annually, so every year we go through that IEP and changes are made to that IEP. There is progress monitoring that is done 4 times a year, 3 that are sent home through progress reports, and 1 that is done at the IEP meeting.
It has to be accessible to general education teachers and to special education teachers, and even to a cafeteria aide that might have involvement with the student. Anyone that has involvement with a student that has an IEP needs to know what's inside that IEP. The IEP must be implemented, and this is something that we say to the teachers all the time. You can't say at the end of the semester, well, I didn't think the child really needed this. It's a legal binding document. If it's in the IEP, it has to be done. A teacher does have the right to go to a case manager and say, well, I don't think the child needs this, or I think the child needs something additional, but what's in that IEP, once it's agreed upon and once it goes into effect, has to be carried out. After that time, if they want to make a change, there's another IEP meeting and there's another IEP that has to be formulated. An IEP is confidential and it's a legal document. So we ask teachers, do not leave them on your desk, put them away, make sure that you respect the students that are involved in these IEPs. The development and the monitoring of the IEP is done by the case manager with vital input from parents, teachers, therapists, and it's basically a team approach, as I had said before. The other key thing that we always have to do is we have to identify areas of deficit that a child may have. Once again, that goes back to why is the child not in a general education class? Those are the things we look at. So if we identify a strength, a weakness, or a deficit, those have to be identified in goals and objectives, and those are things that the student wants to work on because the ultimate goal is least restrictive environment. So, the least restrictive environment, what is that? It's always general education with modifications or accommodations. It's a general education class that has in-class support. Students that are in a general education class are meeting the gen ed curriculum, but they're getting support from an in-class support teacher. General education with in-class resource. Those are students that are in a general education class but are having trouble with the curriculum. So at that point, the curriculum may be modified to meet the needs of that student. Whereas an ICS student is meeting the general ed curriculum and is staying at the same pace as the general ed curriculum. Resource rooms, those are students that are having difficulty. There's difficulty probably with the pace. They may need supplemental material. They may need to be pre-taught. Those classes are smaller ratio inside those classes, so that when a student is in that class, we're still teaching them the curriculum, but we may need to pre-teach them skills ahead of time. We may need to reteach them skills afterwards, and that needs to be done within a smaller setting. The next area is self-contained students, and those students will have outlines more in their IEPs as far as goals and objectives. There are more that those students have to meet in order to ever get back into a general education classroom, if at all possible. The next is out of district, and we also do have some students that do go residential at some point. So what do we have in Bernards Township? Here's just some of our numbers. As of July 1st, I should put my glasses down for this. As of July 1st, we had 693 classified students, and then we had an additional 69 students that were speech-only students. We also currently have, and this number is not in the 693, 41 transfer students, move-in, and current referrals that the child study team is going to have to evaluate. The staff, we have a large amount of people that work in special education. We have 107 special education teachers, 17 child study team members, 4 behaviorists that work throughout the district, not just in our ABA or behavior disabilities classrooms, but they work to help teachers whenever they're having difficulties within any type of classroom. We have 27 therapists. We have 2 transition coordinators. Those were the 2 women that you heard at the end of last year. We have 131 aides. Within that 131 group, we have 7 of them are CDL drivers. We have 10 job coaches. That is also what we heard at the last presentation. And the job coaches go out into the on-job sites. They take the children out, and they really work with them. Those are more of our post-grad students, and once a child hits age 16, plus 4 unified coaches. Our elementaries. These are some of the numbers that we have in each one of our buildings. Every school has in-class support and resource rooms. Those places take place within, the in-class support takes place within the general education. Resource rooms are pull-out, but each one of our buildings has those programs. Besides those programs, we also have the self-contained programs, which are located in all of the elementaries except for Oak Street School. And really, it's always been just a matter of space. Where the space is located, that's sort of where we can get the classes. At Cedar Hill, we have 2 LLD classes. We have 1 ABA class, 3 BD classes. Liberty Corner, we have 3 LLD classes currently. Mount Prospect, we have our integrated prowls program that goes 4 days a week. It's a half-day AM and PM program. We have 1 ABA program, and we have 7. The ABA program is a preschool full-day program for students. And at the elementary level, we have at Mount Prospect currently 7 classrooms. At Annan, once again, we have in-class support across the board, and we also have resource room. But besides those programs, we have an LLD classroom 1, 3 ABA classrooms. We have the BD program, which is a self-contained program. And those students, we have 1 self-contained class, and some of the other students are now actually, because they've been in the program for quite a few years, are going more into the research room, and we have a lot of those students who have even gone back into general ed with supports from our BD teacher. At Ridge, we have a functional life skills and vocational skills program. We have 3 of those classes. Students stay, and why you're going to see at Ridge are classes. Number 1, the bubble is going up that way, but also students stay longer. So students are in the high school from probably, age 15 or 16 to age 21. So our postgrads are staying with us a little bit longer. They're not just graduating after 4 years of high school. Our ABA classes is our growing number, and that's our present number right now, and that's where we see the most amount of growth currently. Right now, we have at the high school, we have, I think, 4 classes, and then next year we anticipate, and through maybe 2022, we should have 5 classes just of ABA students. And right now, for the BD program, what we have is we don't have any self-contained. Those students, by the time they've reached the high school level, are predominantly in our research room classes or our general education classes. Now I'm going to have the supervisors get up and sort of just give you a brief overview of some of the programs that we just spoke about.
So I'd like to tell you a little bit about our behavioral disabilities program. We use a behavior modification system, and our philosophy is based on the need for each student to achieve his maximum social and emotional growth through positive reinforcement. We really want these students to know what they do well and what they're doing right. And so our focus is to help them understand the positive things that they're doing. We do have, as Jean said, we do have our BD classes at Cedar Hill School. We have 3 of them. Those students are also in those gen ed settings, and we do push them out as much as possible. William Annan, we have a self-contained class that's multi-level, and those students, again, are pushed out into the cycles and the social studies and science classes. We've seen a lot of really amazing successes with this program already. At Ridge High School, the students are in the resource rooms, they're in the general education settings. Our staff goes in and out with them and does check-ins with them. If they need help, we're there to support them, but we certainly have seen a lot of students be able to take care of everything on their own and use the coping strategies that we've taught them. The program involves a point system. We are very honest with our students. We give them feedback constantly, tell them how they're doing, tell them what they're doing right, and we assign points. They get points for behaviors as well as academic effort, and that happens several times throughout the day, usually for our younger students and our middle school students, especially after every single period. So they're getting that constant feedback, and that constant feedback allows them to grow. The students can earn additional breaks, additional recess time in the elementary school, and it's worked our way up through the middle school and high school as well as they need it. Our students are able to obtain different levels using that point system. We check in with them once a month and let them know how they're doing and what their points are. Their levels allow them to have different privileges throughout the school. So when they're very young, you might see aides walking down the hallway with them. As they get to different levels, those aides will back off and the students will be able to walk themselves to different classes. Things like that sometimes are really motivating to those students and they want to do well. We have incentive activities that are motivating to the students, and we ask them, what would be motivating to you? And that's what we use to try and help them. As part of the program, we have debriefing and intervention, or we call it DI. So you might have heard of our DI room before. When the staff has tried everything they can, they've tried all the resources, everything that we've taught them to use, they might be calling the de-escalation interventionist to give some additional strategies to help teach that child to use those coping strategies. It is a positive experience. We want it to be something that the students learn from and can actually take and apply to the next time something maybe doesn't go exactly as planned. We always make sure before the students return to the gen ed setting that they're at a good place and they're ready to go, and they let us know when they're ready to go back. We have social curriculums that we use in this program. We use the social decision-making and problem-solving curriculum and a social thinking curriculum. Within the entire school, we're trying to use more common language because we want all of our students to feel comfortable and understand what the expectations are. So some of the words you may be hearing are speaker power, listening position, be your best, and keep calm. And those are things that we teach the students. And so instead of having to point out, oh, remember, you didn't raise your hand, we'll just say something like, remember, we're using speaker power, or thank you for using speaker power. Wow, you're in a good listening position right now. Again, the idea is to keep it positive and not make it negative. We do provide counseling to our students. For some students, they participate in group counseling. And we really do focus on that social decision-making curriculum, but also teaching them those coping strategies. Our goal is to have them be able to use those strategies on their own without someone necessarily telling them always what they need to do. Teachers and aides will integrate the lessons taught throughout the counseling session. So often you'll hear the aides and teachers talking about what's been emphasized, because that's what we're going to work on in the next several weeks. In terms of parent contact, this program, we spend a lot of time making sure our parents are on the same page with us. We want their feedback, and we want to help as well. So there are planned weekly phone calls. They last approximately 5 to 10 minutes, and certainly longer if we need to, based on what the parent is requesting. We briefly explain how the child did throughout the week. We answer the questions, and many of our parents will communicate via email with us as well. So the next program, I have to say, is where my heart is, because this is a program I taught, so I might gush just a little bit. But our elementary school has 5 learning and language disabled classes. We call them our LLD classes. 3 of the classes are in Liberty Corner, and 2 of the classes are in Cedar Hill. William Annan also has a multi-age class as well. The LLD classes are for mild and moderate cognitive or communication impairment. There are so many different students in these classes. They learn from each other. I learned a tremendous amount from them. So there's that wide range of behavior issues, learning issues that can be addressed. The instructional programs are all individually based. We follow those IEPs. We follow the goals and objectives and modifications. There are many mainstreaming opportunities in a gen ed setting. When it's appropriate, we push children out and we support them because we want it to be a positive learning experience. The LLD focus is really based on whatever that student needs. So every student is an individual. If they need help with their academics, social, behavior, life skills, or confidence building, we work on all those things throughout the day. Teachers will articulate each year to make sure students have a smooth transition. And for me, this year, being able to really make sure that elementary school to middle school transition went well, the teachers were so wonderful about talking to each other, and you'll hear them even talk to each other throughout the year as well. Teachers prepare students for general education experiences, so the teachers in the LLD classes will know that there's something coming up, and we're going to pre-teach it. We're going to talk about it. So when those students go into those general education settings, they are ready to be successful participants. The goal for the students is to really feel good about themselves and build that confidence. If you were to walk into an LLD classroom, you would see teachers and aides doing many different things. They would be teaching every academic subject. Some students go out for some subjects, some students are in for all subjects. It really depends on what the student needs. We focus on advocacy skills. We want all of our students to be self-advocates, and that has to start young. And then when they're older, we introduce many different opportunities for them to be even more self-advocates. We talk about life skills, social skills, and coping skills, all which are really important to be successful members of the community. The benefits of the LLD program, in that self-contained classroom, students can learn at their own pace, and it is really a safe and comfortable environment, and that's what students need to learn. Not only in the classroom can we benefit the students within the classroom, but in addition, the general education students who are in the school community benefit from the interaction with our LLD population as well. It's great to see those students working together and learning from each other. So some proud moments that I want to tell you about. I talked to all the LLD teachers in the district, and I told them I was coming here today to talk about our present about our program. And they shared with me some different experiences that they had that they were really proud of. First, they all brought up the field day activities. The fact that all the students are part of a homeroom, they participate in those field day activities. I wish you could hear the students from Gen Ed cheering on the students who are in LLD and the students who are in LLD cheering on each other and the Gen Ed students. The camaraderie is just wonderful. One teacher was telling me about the final basketball game at Liberty Corner and how some of our students were part of the winning team and how great that was to see them participating. The talent show at Cedar Hill, our students get up and participate in that talent show, and that's a big end of the year activity. School plays, we've had many students participate in the drama club and the school plays and get up there and have a wonderful time and be successful. Watching the students at recess, it's wonderful to see them playing basketball, them playing sports, even in indoor recess, inviting each other to come and play and have those social interactions. We've done some really wonderful assemblies where we teach the Gen Ed population, we teach the whole school community about the disabilities that sometimes are in our classrooms. And the students help with those presentations, and they are so proud, and the feedback they get from their Gen Ed peers is amazing. In William Annan, there is a William Annan school store that is run by our LLD class, and our LLD students are often welcome to make the afternoon announcements as well. So those are just some proud moments that we have from our two programs.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Allison Reed, and I feel like this is like the 7th inning stretch. This is the last one to go to do an overview of. I'm going to speak about the Comprehensive Behavior Analytic Program. Within this program, we have just over 90 students that we service from preschool through age of 21. We are ever growing, as Jean had mentioned before. As our students age, we are growing significantly at the high school. Quite a few years ago, we developed a mission statement for this program. So I'm going to give you just a few seconds to read through it, and then I'm going to highlight just a couple of things. So take just a few seconds. Just as we do with many of our programs here in district, we want to provide our students with an individualized public school education. This program specifically focuses on the use of applied behavior analysis, which is a scientifically validated treatment intervention for the most significantly impaired students. Students with autism, students with significant behavioral needs, and students with multiple disabilities. So we call ourselves comprehensive and not just an autism program because we do service additional students as well, not just those with autism. Our program really promotes independence for our students so they can grow and live the most independent life possible after the age of 21. But we also work really closely with our students, their families, so they can really develop those relationships to be ongoing contributing members of our community. We also, having over 90 students requires a lot of staff, so we really strive to continue to train our staff and develop them so they can be really part of this dynamic educational team that we've developed. And together, we do want to make a lives in the difference of our students, just like we do with all of our programs in district. Let me just pull these up. So characteristics of children with autism, just to give you an overview, students have significant learning deficits, deficits in all academic areas. They may have additional language disabilities and communication needs. Maybe they have difficulty with conversations and taking turns, or play skills for our youngest learners. Some of our students have significant behavioral disorders. They don't have the language necessarily to explain what's happening, and so we see an increase in these unexpected types of behaviors, tantrums or aggression, or even injury to themselves, called self-injurious behavior. Some of our students, and many of our students, have attention deficits. Autism is sometimes comorbid with things like mood disorders or ADHD, where students have the attention needs. Our students may have emotional deficits, social deficits. A characteristic with autism is that a student may not always have the desire to interact with others as other students may, and so we're really focusing on teaching students those skills to have social interactions, to make friends, and to play with peers at recess time. We focus at the younger levels a lot on play. A lot of our students don't necessarily know how to, let's say, play with a train on a train track, and so we're teaching them how to play with the most basic, play activities when they're younger. Our students have difficulty with sleep. They don't sleep through the night. It may take a very, very, very long time for them to. Toileting deficits. Age is not a factor with this. Sometimes we have students up into middle school, high school, that this is still a really significant need, and we're really working with the students and their families to help them through. Our students may also have eating difficulties. Maybe they don't like certain textures, or maybe they only want to eat certain foods, and so we want to make sure that we're also developing the most healthy students as we can, and so we help them with those difficulties as well. So applied behavior analysis is specifically designed and researched for students with autism and other behavior difficulties. It is empirically demonstrated, meaning there are hundreds and hundreds of research articles that show its effectiveness, because as you know, in special education and in all of education, we really provide the most up-to-date clinically driven intervention for our students. ABA looks at the entire child. As you saw on the slide before, they have many areas of deficit, many areas of needs, and we're addressing all of those areas with our students. Something unique to the program is that it truly is a complete and individualized curriculum. No one student has the same curriculum as somebody else does. All our curriculum are modified. Over the years, we have written the curriculum. We have taken pieces of other curriculum, alternative curriculum, gen ed curriculum, and we have developed what we called, probably over 1,000 now, instructional skill acquisition programs. So basic skills that we're teaching our students that range, going back to that slide where we have all the areas of difficulty, we're teaching to all of those different areas: academic, behavioral, social, play. We really work with our students to ensure that they're developing in all of those areas. Something else that's unique, but also similar to things that Lisa described earlier, is that we are teaching every skill in a systematic way, but our students need much more repetition and more time in order to master each of those skills. So what may take a typical child one day in the classroom or 1 week to master is taking our students months or sometimes years in order to master those skills. Another aspect of our program is that we utilize an individualized data collection system. So we are really looking at our data, and we're using that data to determine next steps. We are monitoring progress on a weekly basis. So whereas for our other learners, 3 times a year is sufficient to track progress, the students were really looking at each week. Is that intervention working? Do we need to change our strategies? Are they making progress, or do we need to go back to the beginning and try something different in order to help them to learn? The biggest thing with our program is accountability. We hold ourselves accountable for every aspect of the child's programming, as do the parents, as does the district. We want to make sure that our children are learning in all of those areas, and the accountability piece is key. The data don't lie, right? So our data show that either they're progressing or they're not progressing, and that's a great snapshot for us, an objective snapshot to see whether or not they're making that progress that we need them to. Our teachers, our families, our students work really hard within the program. So one aspect of our program are school visits for our parents. Our parents come in on either a weekly, a bi-weekly, a monthly basis, where our parents receive hands-on training with the staff in the classroom in any area of need. They may be working with the classroom teacher, they may be working with a speech therapist or a physical therapist, learning how to work with their child at home and the skills that they're learning at school. One other characteristic I didn't add into that other slide is that students with autism have difficulty generalizing. So they may be able to perform a skill in school, but they can't do it at home, or they can't do it in the community, they can't do it in the grocery store. So that piece of having our parents come into the program, come into the classroom, is really to help to facilitate that generalization. So our students are learning the skills at school, and they're also demonstrating them at home. As well, we are open book with our data. If parents want to review it weekly, if they want to review it monthly, if they want to review it quarterly or trimesters now, we are always looking at that and working with the parents to help them understand how their child is doing within the program. We collaborate, and I always say we're a very, very, very collaborative program. We collaborate with everybody because we have to. It's best for our learners. So we collaborate with the speech language specialist or the speech therapist, the occupational therapist, the physical therapist, if the child has these needs, the adaptive physical education teacher, as well as a teacher of our deaf for some of our students. So there are a lot of professionals, there are a lot of staff members that are working with each and every student to ensure the accountability that we have for our learners. So just as our special services therapists are important, so are our instructional aides. They receive training in ABA and autism. Last year, we started a monthly and we started doing it twice a month, a training program on various topics in applied behavior analysis. How do we work with the learners? How do we prompt the learners? How do we utilize specific strategies in order to help them learn the skills that we need them to? They continually receive hands-on training by the teacher and the district behaviorist. So our teachers' responsibility in the classroom is not just the education of the students, but it's also the monitoring of the instructional staff, ensuring that they are learning the skills that they need in order to continue to teach our learners. The instructional staff end up working with all the students in the classroom. So that helps with that generalization piece, with ensuring that our learners don't just learn with one person, but that they learn across multiple people. And so approximately every half hour at the younger levels, every 45 minutes to an hour at the upper level, our students are seeing a different adult working with them. Our instructional staff also help to prepare the individualized curriculum for one specific child. So any of the programs that they're working on throughout the day, whether or not it's letter identification or math skills, that their materials are ready to go in the place that they need to be, so that way they can be prepared for the day with the students. And they also attend the workshop trainings that we run on applied behavior analysis, so they understand how to implement the skills with the students. As I said before, our parents are a key component, just as they are in the development of the IEP. We really want that active participation to develop those goals and objectives, because if you remember back to that slide with all the areas of deficits, those are all the areas that we're covering in our IEP. So we need to work with the parents to identify what skills they need at home, what they're not performing, if they're not brushing their teeth, or if they're not getting dressed independently. All of those things are important for us here at school, because students change clothes for gym at the middle school and at the high school. And so we're really trying to pre-teach those skills before they get to that level. And again, they receive that hands-on training to help implement that IEP. We integrate our students into many different areas. Every child's program looks completely different. Our students are integrated into specials, lunch, and recess, some with, some without the support of instructional aid. It really depends on what they need. Our students really have some great academic skills in some areas. So some students may spend part of the day in our comprehensive behavior analytic program, and the other part of the day they're in a math gen ed class. Some need the support in there, some don't. Some have some really fascinating skills in specific areas, and so we really gear their programming towards the individual learner. We utilize very frequently what we call a reverse mainstreaming. So when some think of mainstreaming, it's pushing our students out into the general education. Reverse mainstreaming is taking a few select peers from general education and bringing them into the self-contained classroom. So we do that at all levels, and specifically at our elementary level, we have a peer mentor program. If you've had a fourth grader, you may have received something from one of the case managers at Mount Prospect, and we invite those learners to apply. They write an essay, they come and observe the students, and they tell us why they want to be a peer mentor for our students. Those peer mentors then help us at the middle school, and there are peers at the high school. And so we really try to get them actively involved as early as possible in working with our learners. Our adaptive PE program as well does a reverse mainstreaming, where middle school and high school are taking students from the general ed PE population, and they're coming to help our students. So instead of running the track and first period gym, they get to be in the weight room working out with our students. We do a lot of building-specific activities. Some of them, we do the assemblies at all the buildings. We participate in Multicultural Day. Mount Prospect started a kind of a teaming program where they have students from and staff from all different grade levels. Our students are all divided and part of those teams, and so they really get to understand the interests of each of the learners, gen ed and special ed, within that team, and I think that's been a great way to integrate our students. We have a new program we're starting this year, a Music Buddies program, where we have students from Oak Street. And you saw there were no self-contained programs at Oak Street, and so we have students from Oak Street working with our corresponding, I guess, almost like a pen pal, with our students at Mount Prospect, using one of the very tapped-in, areas of music. We have some students who really thrive with music and play great instruments and create songs and are great singers, and so we really are trying to kind of delve into those talents and share it across district. Beyond the classroom, our goal is to integrate our students not just within the school community, but within the town community. And so, as you heard last spring, we support our students in job sampling. We bring them grocery shopping in the day, and they grocery shop for all of their food that they may need for the week and for lunch at school. We're at Stop and Shop, we're at ShopRite, we're everywhere that everybody else stops on their way home from work or home from school. They're dining at local restaurants. They are at Sienna's and at Dunkin' Donuts. We really encourage our students as they get towards the post-grad years, 18 to 21, we're no longer giving them their fitness skills on site at the high school. We're bringing them over to the Y or wherever the parents may have memberships, because where are they going to be after 21 but is outside of Ridge? They're going to be out in the community. We also take them on the walking path at Dunham Park, right? Because isn't that what you do in town? So we really want to expose them to all those areas. You've most likely heard before about our greenhouse at the high school. And so we're teaching them work skills. They are recording greenhouse temperature, and they are monitoring that. They are planting and weeding and harvesting, and many are utilizing the vegetables as a farm-to-table approach. We want them to take it from the garden, we wash the vegetables, they chop them up, and they make salads for we do more like a classroom community lunch every Friday. So we're trying to teach them that there is a connection between what's happening at the greenhouse and what they have on their table. We have students who participate in athletics. We had a student on the swim team this year. We have students who've run track. They are part of band and orchestra and chorus and any other activity that we can put our students in. We're always adding more every year. For our parents, we really tried to provide them the support. You kind of heard that as I talked about how we really look at all the different areas of life at home and during school. And so with students who have such significant needs, sometimes our parents need that respite. They need that break because it may not be easy to find that babysitter who could take care of their child at home, and so we try to provide that for our parents as well. And so we have a program called Friday Night Events. It happens approximately once every month. We have our first Friday night event coming up for the school year at the Big Ridge football game, and we are going to tailgate beforehand. And then our parents will come and pick up their students and take them to the football game, but we get our students together before that happens. Our students do movie night, they have a game night, we do a Halloween party. So and on those nights, we serve dinner to our students, the parents get to go out, take a break, go get dinner, really have that time that they may need. One of the programs that I really started almost 9 years ago was the swimming program. And it's such an important skill for our learners. We swim at the YMCA once a week for 30 minutes. We are a collaborative effort between our district staff and the instructional staff over at the YMCA. They have been wonderful in establishing a collaborative relationship with us. The goals of our swim program for our youngest learners is to increase independent skills. Not all kids like to swim, right? And so we really want our students learning to swim in the water. But first and foremost, we're teaching safety skills. We want our students to be safe. We want them to be able to find their way back to the wall if they fall in, right? That's the fear of every parent, right, is around open water. And then beyond the safety skills, we're teaching our students to swim for fitness or swim for competition, right? How many adults love to swim laps or want to stay healthy and go to the pool to participate in exercise? So once our students learn the safety skills, then we're teaching them. And sometimes, as we found last year, one of our students wanted to join the swim team. And so we were able to incorporate him to the swim team. So again, it really starts with those safety skills. Drowning is the leading cause of injury-related death in children and in children with autism. So it is just that important. Our students have frequent elopement. So elopement means that they may run away. They don't have the communication skills. They may go towards what they like. A lot of them like the water. And so that really is kind of that piece where we're looking at the safety skills. Our students are learning the water safety skills, but not just that. At the YMCA, they're learning that community involvement. They're learning how to check in. They're learning to navigate the locker room, so that way they can go back over the weekend and feel comfortable in that environment with their family. I have to say, I love at the town pool watching our kids jump off the high dive and swim in the pool, and mom doesn't always have to be in the water, right? Because isn't that part of kids getting older, where you don't have to necessarily be on top of your children in the water anymore? So our children are increasing that independence, where they can enjoy it, they see friends from school, and they could be safe around water. Jane.
So, never ask special education to speak because it will never stop. And that's it, really. So it really, as we said, it sort of takes a village. There's so many different components that's involved in all the programs that we have. So thank you for the attention you gave us tonight. First night back, I know it's tough.
Wow, thanks, team. That was a lot of information, a really, really great job. But I know it was a lot and kind of a lot of talking and some of it quick and rapid fire, but we hit you with a lot for a reason. I think Jean kind of hit on it as we started to talk about the history of what tiered systems of support is really about. It's really about the concept of looking at all of the children. They're all of our children. It's not general ed and special ed. It's just trying to find the best way to help all the kids. So I really appreciate the time it took to get through all of that. And with that, we usually end our presentations with an opportunity for board members to ask questions. So if you have any questions, the team is here. Anybody have anything? You're just numb.
It's more just a clarification for people who don't know. I think might have been Lisa who used the term PLCs. I know what it is, but the mass public may not know. Could you just tell what that stands for?
Sure. That might be one thing that I actually know from all of that. No, you guys have taught me a ton. You've taught me a ton, yeah. DIBELS, I've learned a lot about DIBELS. Professional Learning Communities, PLC. So teams of teachers focused in on particular areas that they're trying to work with students, and a lot of that is focused on looking at what the students are trying to learn and what data do we have to speak to whether or not we can see that the students are learning that. If they aren't, how are we responding? And if they already have a particular skill down pat, how are we responding to that? Mr. Burke?
I'm impressed with what you're trying to achieve. My gosh, very important. But I want to go back to the very first section. where you were talking about Tier 1 and Tier 2. The special ed group, and is there any data to show how many children were able to switch from Tier 2 to Tier 1? And I appreciate that the mix changes every year, but do you have any data to show any progress?
So just to clarify, Tier 1 is Gen Ed, but 2 and 3 are still Gen Ed students. They're not special ed.
Well, then maybe I have to rephrase the question.
Okay, I can still answer it, but go ahead.
I want to know how many, the percent, or were you able to transfer and bring some of the kids in special ed to general ed? That's my general, can you document any of that?
Oh, from special education so what we're talking about with interventions, these are students before they get into special education. So
I think what Mr. Byrne is most interested in is understanding that Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 are general ed students. If you take a look at, say, 1,000 students, if 200 of those students were in special education in 18-19, how many of them in 19-20 were moved away from special education back into the general education program? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, those are, I don't know the exact numbers on declassified students, but we have gotten a bit better with that, with declassifying them. What we've really been working on is not getting the students classified, so that if we give them these types of interventions and they're working the way that they are, they're not going anymore right from Gen Ed right into special education. We're giving them that middle ground so that they can work on those interventions so that the students do not need classification. Because one of the things that we've found over the years is that what happens is once a child gets into special education, it's often difficult to get the kids out for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes parents are very nervous about declassifying a student. My child's had these supports all these years. You're going into high school, there's college. So we've found that part is a very difficult process. Once they're there, even when we sometimes have the data to show the parents, they're very, very hesitant about moving away from it. So we thought after this New Jersey report came out that probably the better step is, let's not get the kids into special education. Let's do what we can do prior to special education, because special education should always be your last resort. When you've gotten everything else, except for a child that has a very specific disability, then the child goes into special education. So we're still working on that declassification piece of it, but this is more or less getting them before they go in, giving them, I think what Lisa was pointing out, the important thing about what they do with intervention is they're still learning the curriculum. So we're not taking the curriculum away from them. They learn that curriculum so they don't fall behind. But now what we're doing is catching those students where those deficit areas are. So that's outside, so they spend their time learning a curriculum, but then those little pieces that they miss, and after years and years after that, that can develop into a larger deficit. But now what we're doing is giving them the curriculum. They don't lose time with the curriculum, but we're also identifying those areas of deficit right in the general education class so that we can keep them on grade level or close to it.
I'm going to rephrase my question again then. Is there any documentation that would show a diminishment in the classification
At this
as a result of your program?
I think we're starting to, I don't have the exact numbers, we're starting to see less students at grade 3 that are becoming classified, definitely. And we are doing more interventions. Our numbers are hard because we do get a lot of transfer-ins, we get students that so the number, unfortunately, our numbers in special ed have not gone down, but we are definitely seeing less students that are being classified that first, second, and third grade used to be a big year for students that are going into special education, and that we are seeing diminish slightly. But it is a process.
You should be attracting parents with special ed children to town because of the program.
Right.
And that does happen.
And that,
Then
right.
back to the question, can you document?
We can't get you numbers on some of those because we have been keeping track of what we keep track of is our referral rates. So I can get those referral rates that we have through the course of the year, especially, and we keep track of the referral rates from first, second, all the way up. So we can take a look at that. And when we started this initially, third grade was a big jump all of a sudden because the curriculum begins to change. There's a lot more reading that begins to take place. That's when a lot more of our students are beginning to get classified, and we are seeing less of those students at the elementary levels. Oh?
Hi. I'm just sort of curious. So I've heard Lisa talk about the interventions in the elementary school, and I actually totally understand everything now, Lisa, because I've heard it a couple of times. Yay! So thinking of things as tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, it all makes sense when I look at what's going on in the elementary school. So when you get up to the older grades, are teachers who are differentiating, for example, like you're a math teacher at WAMS and you have kids in your class that are struggling, but they weren't classified, and maybe they weren't already in class support. Are they using that terminology of the tiers, or is it still more just differentiation? I'm just curious, because it's kind of all a new thing.
I think it's still a bit more differentiation at that level. We haven't, it's taken a lot of work just to get where we are at this point at the elementary, because I think the staff development is the key piece of it, teaching teachers how to test, how to take the data, and how to apply the data. So the majority of our time has been spent at the elementary. There are various things that we do in general education. That's when the general education people sort of step in and give those pieces of it. But as far as an RTI type of model, we haven't gotten that far.
I think that's part of why it's confusing for parents to talk about, because there's always, we've always differentiated, and we've used map data to pick certain things or skills kids need to work on. So it's not like it wasn't happening, it's just different terminology and a little bit more data collection, I guess.
Right, and we still look at those skills and identify those students, and definitely they do receive gen ed support at that point.
When you look at it, that one report you cited, it's early intervention. So you're looking at that time, that 5 to 8 years old, where after that, I can't quote it, I don't know who said it, but I can't quote it, it takes almost twice as long to catch up those skills.
Right.
It just does.
Right.
So the sooner that we can look at that K1 and get those kids on track without taking away the gen ed, the bigger the gain is for everyone.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's just confusing because New Jersey wants to use that terminology and that triangle all the way for everything. Yeah. Yeah. Right. 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 So I just kind of wanted to say that because I think it does get confusing for people. It's not like this is like a completely new concept. It's just they're calling it this, and you know what I mean? Yeah. Anyone else?
I just have a really fast question. From the first year that you brought RTI in, what age group are those little ones now? Like,
Third grade.
they're just third grade? Okay. We've been talking about this long.
Yes, it does. I think it took us 2 years to get it in.
So in other words, we don't really have a whole lot of,
Right, yeah.
no, I'm saying, we don't have years, like year-over-year data to demonstrate
right.
whether or not we're seeing a reduction. That takes time because the program's in its youth. I won't say infancy, but youth.
But I can share one thing. When you look at that one slide, you're okay. I'm sorry. When you look at that one slide where it was the phonological awareness in kindergarten, the very first year we started it, we had for WIN groups probably, I want to say in each building, at least 40 kids at a skill 3. This year, I think we'll have 5 kids. I know, I'm so happy. But that's because it's gen ed and it's instructional support and it's working. But it's catching them early. Do you know what I mean? So that's kind of that's the only way that the consultants and I could come up with without a longitudinal data. So I have a chart, and each year we chart from whatever 3 years, the third graders currently, and then where we have moved up. And then eventually what will happen is that we won't need as many students in those small groups, so we'll have room to incorporate maybe a second grader or a third grader or a move-in. that was not with us in kindergarten or first grade. But that's huge, and that goes all to the teachers. It's not just me. It is those gen ed teachers and reading specialists and special ed teachers. They do it with fidelity. They do the data. They look at it. They're just amazing. They're amazing. Even the company wants us to apply for one of their grants and one of their accolades. They give it out to 1 or 2 districts that they work with. They have never seen teachers like our teachers before, ever. I'm talking gen ed teachers too, that have taken to it and they do it with fidelity. It's not me teaching them, so.
Anything else? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Is this yours?
No, that's Kristen's.
Oh, Kristen's.
That's
Okay.
Okay. We are now up to the superintendent's report, and Ms. Markarian has listed the school opening report. Sorry, you didn't have it open yet.
Yeah. Sorry, just grab my notes here. Okay, so just briefly to share a little bit about our opening. I wrote a couple of things in SOS Express, but basically I'm really pleased to say I think we had an excellent opening. We had a brand new master schedule software put in place. We had a lot of people. I see Stephanie sitting out there. I know Kristen's here. She worked extremely hard on this. Our supervisors, everybody that just presented, I mean the entire administrative team, teachers that helped teach teachers. Obviously it's still ongoing, but as far as getting schedules done, getting class assignments done in a new system, I have to give them all the credit for that work. It worked out well. And in general, I think the feedback from both residents and staff has been that the new system seems to be a significant improvement, although there's still a lot to learn. It's got a lot to offer. So we're working on trying to take advantage of all of its features now, and that'll be ongoing probably for a couple of years, truthfully. As far as our numbers, our enrollment numbers are concerned, when we looked at this on September 6th, we were at a total of 5,137 students in the district. That's down about 185 or so students. It's a moving target, really changes a lot in the first couple weeks of school, but that's about where we are. We have about 1,829 at Ridge, 1,282 at Annan. Cedar Hill is at 550, Liberty Corner at 517, Oak Street at 420, and Mount Prospect at 539. So our total is at 5,137. So obviously it's something we talked about a lot last year, monitoring our district enrollment in conjunction with what may happen around town with respect to building projects and new housing. So it's something that we've been staying in pretty close contact with the township. I know that we've also been in contact with the district's demographer. In fact, Mr. McLaughlin was just reaching out to him today to see if he could help us update his projected enrollment numbers in light of the most recent information we have about potential construction in the town. So we'll be working on that. We'll certainly report that back out to the board and the public. Transportation, always one of the biggest challenges. I see Jen Nicholson. She's diligently taking her notes back there. Come on, Jen, say hello. There she is. So I just want to thank Jen. I know that I can attest to her extended hours in the last couple weeks, staying later in the afternoons, working with the community and our transportation department to try to get busing issues resolved. I'm sure we're not at 100%, but we're pretty darn close at this point in terms of trying to get everyone who needs transportation or busing taken care of. So thanks to Jen for that. And overall, as I said, I think things went really well. I did want to share one other thing in my report today, and that is just to share out a little bit that we have since, last year worked on our 2-year goal of our strategic plan, and we were successful in having our strategic planning meetings involving the staff, students, the community, and now that we have our plan in place, we are working on how we are going to continue to maintain that connection with the staff and the community and the students. So we have some ideas and some things in the works to try to make that happen. Kristen here on my left was kind enough to work on this a little bit and came up with the moniker. Was it Berners Township Connect? BT Connect, I think was the name you came up with. So we kind of latched onto that. It was a nice idea. So we started working on that some more. Advocacy met today with some of the PTO presidents. They'll be reporting out probably at the next meeting. But just to make sure that the board is aware, we are following through on this goal of a 2-year goal to work on the strategic plan. We're not just dropping the ball and taking a document and hiding it away somewhere. We are going to continue to work diligently on it, and you'll certainly be hearing more. And we're looking forward to getting community members, staff members, and I was excited to hear Jimmy talking about his enthusiasm to get students to be heard. It'll be a great opportunity for that to happen. So, you have to, delegate that, Jimmy. You can't do it all on your own, right? You get some other people involved so you can get your own life accomplished too. So that'll be exciting, and we look forward to continuing to work on that.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I guess, because we were talking about it this morning at the advocacy meeting, and Kristen explained some of the ideas. So it would involve sort of a big committee that would coordinate all of the different subcommittees that would talk about different parts of the strategic plan. So that's the plan. So there's going to be lots of opportunities for people to get involved, lots of meetings. Everyone can participate.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Nick? Okay. At this time, we're up to public comment on agenda items. If anyone has a comment or question on an agenda item or on the presentation, if you come up, tell us your name and address, and you can sign in on the clipboard after you speak, if you'd like.
Good evening. My name's Liz Vinhall, 22 Elizabeth Street in Basking Ridge. First of all, thank you. I know it's a lot of work and dedication to our children. I just had a few comments that I'd ask the board to take into consideration because special education is something that I hold dear. Listening to Ms. Stanzione and Ms. O'Connell's presentation, I had a question. It seems that the general overall theme for special education is to not have children classified. So one of my concerns is, to quote Ms. Stanzione, was an opinion is just that with that data. But my concern with that statement is, isn't the data skewed if what they call the universal screeners have a vested interest in having the children be placed in the general education population versus being classified and having what each child needs to be in the least restrictive environment? So I just ask for you, when you're reviewing these special eds, to take that into consideration. because the data that teachers are providing are just that. Their goal and their instruction is to get children into the general ed. So my concern would be that what they're providing in terms to the parents and to the people who are concerned about these kids is skewed, because that's the momentum that they're being pushed. My other question or comment is, they talked very specifically about mild to moderate disabilities with no definition as to what that is. That's concerning to me because there's several children who don't fall into the mild to moderate. Ms. O'Connell mentioned that specific disabilities would then require children to be classified. What are those specific disabilities? And I think parents are interested in knowing what they are and understand, maybe then they would understand this tier system better. And then my last comment would be, I know last year you have created a committee for the G&T, the gifted and talented. I would ask maybe create a committee for special education that can do an outreach to the community to understand this a little bit better, because as we sit here and listen to the presentation about the tier, it seems very textbook, but not necessarily implemented to the special education. Thank you again for all your hard work.
Is there anyone else for public comment on agenda items? No? Okay, at this point, I'll close public comment.
Yeah, so I don't, yeah, I know, I think Jean and Lisa are still here as well, but I can certainly comment a little bit with respect to, the notion that we're trying not to classify students. And we talked about this even when we started 2-3 years ago in talking about tiered systems of support, and not, specifically exactly not wanting parents to walk away from the conversation thinking that this is all about the percentage of students classified and trying not to have certain percentage of students classified, try to hit some target number, try not to classify any students. I don't think that is at all the goal. I think that what we're about is trying to determine what the students need, and we're talking about all the different ways that we're trying to deliver that and meet the need for the students, and where the data says this isn't working and we need to take things beyond a particular set of services that was described in this way with tiers, that's perfectly fine, and we're more than happy to do that. So I don't want people to go away thinking that, the goal is to, try to manipulate numbers or, brainwash people into thinking that, well, you're not allowed to classify students. That's not at all the case. Sure.
I think, you can look at it from the other way when you think about the tiered system. Like, you shouldn't have to get a classification to get interventions. Like, if a kid is struggling, they're struggling, right? So they should be getting interventions specific to whatever they're struggling with at the time. So, it shouldn't be something that only kids who got classified get if there's another student struggling with that particular skill. So I think you can look at it that way. I do know that there are stories out there of states or big city districts that did put limits and say you literally can't classify more than a number of students. That's not what I've heard in New Jersey, and people want districts to be aware of like the whole process and how it's happening and things like that. So I agree with what Mr. Markarian said, but I agree that it can be a kind of confusing message. Okay. We're up to approval of minutes. There's one item. Would someone like to make a motion? Mrs. Wooldridge and Mrs. White seconded. Any comments or questions about the minutes? No? Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Korn?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Madam President?
Thank you. We're up to finance. There are 6 items. One of them is on an addendum. Would someone like to make a motion? Ms. Schaefer and Ms. Korn. Trying to I always look and then do the same people. Okay, did you want to?
Yeah, I'll do the report first.
Sure.
Okay. So finance met on August 22nd, and the first Point of discussion was the summer construction update. At WAMS, the HVAC installations were completed August 17th and 18th, and Mr. McLaughlin worked with Aramark to have the cleaning completed by August 26th to be ready for the start of school, which it was. All the HVAC units at the time were operated, and at the time of the report, all but one was working. There was an issue with the controller card that would be fixed before school starts. There was an issue with replacement of 5 windows as part of the project. Temporary windows were installed while the contractor was waiting for delivery of the permanent replacements, and a final milestone payment was still to be made at the time of the report. The door replacement update, at the time of the report, the contractor had not taken delivery of the hardware for the doors, but Mr. McLaughlin worked with them to get the hardware in, and CNM informed us that the door installation would begin on August 23rd and would be completed on August 29th, and it is complete.
The hardware is complete.
Yeah,
There
the
are
doors are still
this-
on order.
Right.
Yeah. The second item for discussion was a review of the 4-year capital plan, which Mr. McLaughlin also presented on the evening of the public board meeting on August 26th, so I'm not going to go over that. The third item was the lacrosse wall. The project is on hold while the boosters are raising funds. The fourth item was the Ridge Sports Foundation pavers. Mr. Bispo and Mr. McLaughlin presented the Ridge Sports Foundation with the alternative location for placing the pavers between along the asphalt path that leads from the stairs to the bleachers around Lee Field. The Sports Foundation said it was really like to use the original location in front of the Wellness Center. So to do that, Mr. Bispo said that an engineering firm would have to be retained to produce site elevations, and we were discussing that with the Sports Foundation to talk about cost sharing. The fifth item was the Oak Street Playground project. The contractor is Game Time. They were retained by the PTO. Some of the supplies were on site, but at the time of the report, no demolition or installation work had been performed. The next item up was the Ridge High School addition construction update. The kitchen designer, which was subcontracted by our architect at Spiesel, had been working with Advocate and Aramark to vet the layout and equipment needed for food production, storage, and serving in the new cafeteria space. 2 outstanding items were still needed at the time of the report. The civil engineer was also doing site work to plan for access for deliveries. The current concept is to make a sloped sort of driveway or path at the back end of Lot D that would lead to the back entrance of the addition on the 700 wing. The last item discussed was the Ridge High School student activities account. So Mr. Mark Carrion explained that he worked with Mr. Kraus to designate certain accounts as clearing accounts, which means that the account is not for a student activity club, but rather for funds to be passed through to the BOE account. So for example, testing accounts like PSAT and AP and parking lot fees were designated as clearing accounts. Balances in the clearing accounts go to the board at the end of the year because the Board of Education subsidizes and or pays for costs incurred for these testing and or other services. For example, in the AP testing account collected approximately $160,000, and after the AP testing service was paid, the balance was cleared to the board since the board paid approximately $12,000 for stipend and coverage slips for proctors. In 2018-2019 school year, the AP testing program was in the black, $1,500, while the PSA testing account had a deficit of approximately $1,500, so it was essentially a wash. Funds had accumulated over the years in some of these clearing accounts because the funds were not passed back to the BOE to pay for staffing costs. Consequently, those accrued funds were used to pay for new furniture in the Ridge High School cafeteria. Mr. Markarian also explained that the yearbook account does not do any fundraising, but a percentage of sales are rebated back to the school from the yearbook publisher for selling the yearbooks. Mr. Markarian intended to ask the district auditor if the rebated funds could be used to purchase items, for example, t-shirts, and or provide scholarships for students working on the yearbook. We also discussed the vending machine account as requiring further investigation as to identifying destinations of money leaving those accounts. And finally, Mr. Markarian explained that the field trip accounts are in and out. Consequently, little to no balances should be left in these accounts after a field trip is paid for and over. In terms of the items on the agenda, the first one is disbursements. Number 2 is professional development. Number 3 is transfer of funds from the Capital Reserve Fund. to the Capital Projects Fund for the Ridge High School edition. Number 4 is approval of a grant application. Number 5 is placement of a student or rental agreement for classified student at the Morris Union Joint Share Commission. The addendum is the acceptance of a donation for the Ridge High School Band trailer repairs paid for by the Ridge Marching Band. So thank you very much to them for donating that for the repair of the trailers. That's it.
Actually, I noted, excuse me, it's actually an upgrade to the trailer. It's not a repair so much as an upgrade. What they're doing is increasing the axle and weight load capacity of the trailer by replacing the axle. So.
Karen, you have a question?
I just wanted to confirm that with the pavers project, going from one place to another and back to the other place, that it's still just an ongoing conversation with that group, because there are several people and several questions and concerns still with that project. So I'm just confirming we're still at a conversation.
So we passed, we voted to approve a resolution to look into the project further, but I don't think it was authorization to proceed with the project at the time because we were still vetting that location.
And now we need
original
an engineer
location.
to do it.
Yeah. So now that we're back to the original location, there were some drainage issues and other things that we had to discuss. So that's kind of where we are now. That is where we are now. Not even kind of.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Byrne? Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Korn?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Madam President?
Thank you. We're up to the Personnel Committee. We're withdrawing item number 3, so we need someone to make a motion to move items 1 to 2 and 4 to 22. 4 to 22. And there's an addendum for that. Okay, Mr. Salmon and Mrs. Gray seconded. The Personnel Committee has not met since the last board meeting, so I don't have a report. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Korn?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Madam President?
Thank you. We're up to the Policy Committee. There is one item. Would someone like to make a motion? Mr. Salmon and Mrs. Wooldridge seconded. You haven't met. Okay, so we just need a roll call.
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Korn? Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes,
Madam President?
thank you. We're up to the Curriculum Committee.
The Curriculum Committee met this past Friday, and I have not yet completed the minutes, but I'll be reporting out at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Advocacy?
Advocacy just met today, so I'll be reporting at our next meeting.
Okay. SEL?
I reported out at the last meeting, and we don't meet till the end of the month.
Okay. I think you had a liaison report, right, Linda?
Yeah, the Municipal Alliance had its first fall meeting on the 3rd. So let's see, I have a few items. The Peer Educator Program at WAMS, which was in its first year last year, is going to continue this year. It has a new name called RISE, which stands for Reaching, Informing, and Supporting Everyone. And then the RAD program is also continuing. And for the fall, the focus of the RAD group is going to be on vaping. For winter, it's school stress, and spring, mental health. And then I just wanted to note some of the upcoming events in September. On Monday, September 23rd, at the board meeting, there'll be a presentation on the Pride survey results. On Wednesday, September 25th, it's the Teen Volunteer Fair. In October, on Friday, October 18th, it's Empowerment Day at William Annan. In November, okay. And then in January, there's going to be a screening of the Screenagers movie. However, that movie, the original version, is several years old, so there's a new updated movie that's coming out on October 6th, so it's Caitlin Cartocho is going to look at that. It's probably going to be the new version. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Yeah, it's January 23rd, 2020, which sounds very
Sounds
strange.
weird. It does. Okay, thank you, Linda. So now we're up to public comment on non-agenda items. If you come up, tell us your name and address, and then you can sign in on the clipboard afterwards.
Hi, Melissa Moss, 62 Ramapo Drive, Basking Ridge. Many parents would like to know the progress of the health curriculum that was going to be written over the summer, myself included. And we're wondering if there was any student involvement in the spring about what might be helpful in that curriculum or not helpful. And also parent involvement. We just want to know. We would also like to look, if possible, be able to see that curriculum, what's going to be delivered to our kids in what we were told would be the 3-week add-on sophomore year. And also maybe an update about what the district is thinking about in terms of additional health that we just got, vague hints about. Maybe it would be added, maybe it wouldn't in some of the SOS, but we'd like some concrete details about those things. Thank you.
Is there anyone else for public comment? No? Okay, I guess if there's no one else, I'll close public comment. Would you like to respond?
Sure. So thank you for the public comment. A couple things before I forget. Immediately on my left is Miss Kristen Fox, now that we're almost to the end of the meeting. Prior to last year, we had the position of Director of Curriculum, and last year, Ms. Fox was appointed in that capacity, but the title was changed to Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. So as such, we determined that the Assistant Superintendent has always sat on my left, so now we have Sean and Kristen both on my left. And I think the question about curriculum is timely and also highlights the reason why Ms. Fox has been coming to all of the meetings since she was hired as our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum. So I will respond a little bit, and then Ms. Fox should know that she is welcome to jump in. That's sort of the protocol, and you're welcome to do so. But I could tell you that you just heard, I believe, Ms. Gray note that we had our curriculum committee meeting, but she's not going to be reporting out on that meeting until the next Board of Education meeting at the end of September. And when she does, I'm sure you're going to hear about the presentation that was given at that meeting in answering the question of what happened with those 3 weeks in 10th grade health. So we'll certainly report out on that in September. But in short, I can tell you that the plan was put together, and we also intend to make a more complete presentation to the public about the content of that curriculum this fall. It's on our radar to get it done sometime this fall so that there will be more thorough explanation. And also, I think, kind of connecting to what I was talking about a few minutes ago with respect to BT Connect, and this idea of trying to make sure we follow up on some of our initiatives in the strategic plan, which included things like character education, health curriculum, things of that nature. I anticipate that we will be looking to create some type of subcommittee that can kind of focus on this very issue and get more input from both the community and students and staff. Did I miss anything? Probably. I thought I forgot something.
No,
right?
I don't think you forgot anything. That's mostly what I wrote down. But I was going to add, when Ms. Gray reports out, one of the things that the health teacher and supervisor presented was a scope and sequence of what they did with the health topics across all grades. And they're going to be including that, the teachers are going to be including that for all grades. So you can see where some of the curriculum has been, they've had opportunities in other grades to move some of the topics around. And you'll also see what's included in 10th grade. So that's one piece, as well as the fact that the curriculum document in Rubicon will be formally updated once it's completely finalized in our online database and made public within the next week or so. So you'll be able to see the curriculum there soon. And I was going to mention that one of the subcommittees we're looking to form is, as part of BT Connect, is on the health curriculum. So that where there would be some input from parents and students as we implement not just the sophomore program, but the health program overall. That's about it. Yeah, go ahead.
And correct me if I'm remembering this incorrectly. My recollection is that in the spring, Mr. Kraus met with student focus groups, and they were spoken to and inquired, or they inquired about what their input would be into the plans for that summer curriculum writing on the health, the 3 weeks of health, as well as the other opportunities that Ms. Fox just mentioned.
He did do that, and the teachers in the health classes towards the end of the year did also survey the students in the classes and got their input as the year was coming to a close, and used that as part of the curriculum writing.
And I also remember positive feedback when we met with the student council. I don't know if you remember, the kids actually gave us positive feedback that they were going to be getting some health in sophomore year because they kind of missed out. They actually did. It was
And
like,
they
I
gave
was
us
even
feedback
surprised.
about specific topics they felt like
Yes.
kids need to hear about at certain times, because that's like a big year when stuff starts to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
The sneak peek it seems like it came together very nicely. But it was a 2.5-hour meeting, so it's a lot to write in minutes.
You didn't spend did you spend your whole weekend writing them? Yeah. Okay. We're up to board forum. Does anyone have anything for board forum? Okay, go ahead.
So it's not really board forum, but I did mean to mention that we started a Q&A, I reported out at the last Board of Ed meeting, on some of the things surrounding the plans for addition here at Ridge and the master schedule change for Ridge. And I started to put together a Q&A, which is actually a Google Doc linked to the website. So as different things are added to it, it kind of automatically gets posted up on the website. So just to follow up, if you're interested, if you look at that document on what Mr. Salmon reported out, we did put the concept plan to show that driveway connection. So you could take a look at that if you're interested. And we also added a Q&A item on that to describe what was going on with the master schedule plan. And we're having a kickoff meeting on September 17th to meet with representatives from our software provider that's doing scheduling so that we can get a kickoff started on doing a mock schedule for the rotating drop. I forgot to mention that, sorry.
Anything else for board forum? No? Okay, at this point, we're up to adjournment. Would someone like to make a motion? Mrs. Wooldridge, and somebody second? Mr. Salmon. All in favor? Okay.
So Rod,